The Phoenix Suns are the center of trade talks this offseason, with players like Nazir Little, and now Jusuf Nurkic's name is getting brought up as a prime trade candidate. Who could the Suns go out and acquire, and what is the best decision for this team for getting a new center if they trade off Jusuf Nurkic? I'm Bruce Velez, alongside my co-host C.J. Pierre, and we're going to be diving on all of this on this episode of Suns Digest. But before we get into the Jusuf Nurkic news, 96% of you guys who watch our videos are not subscribed. So I'd greatly appreciate it if you guys hit that subscribe button down below, as this is the place for daily Phoenix Suns content for you guys throughout the entire offseason, as we deal with all the drama from head coaching staff to roster. We all know that Mike Budenholzer is going to have his introductory press conference tomorrow, so we'll have a video breaking down that as well. So if you guys want to make sure you stay up to date, hit that subscribe button as we reach for 1,000 subscribers. But CJ, let's get into the topic at hand today. Make sure to grab a snack, as it's going to be a jam-packed episode. And Jusuf Nurkic, the newly acquired center from last season to replace DeAndre Ayton, could possibly be one of the names on the move here. If we want to look at this tweet from Evan Sidery, we can see that the Suns have limited assets to improve their roster, so Jusuf Nurkic is a potential trade candidate to monitor. Phoenix is unable to take back more salary than they send out, but Nurkic's $18.2 million figure alongside a number 22 overall pick plus their 2031 first could net them a difference maker. We obviously have broken down how the Suns have wanted to use these trades, have wanted to use this first round picks. So CJ, my question to kind of you is dealing with Jusuf Nurkic and these first round picks, is this the smart move for the Phoenix Suns? Should they be upgrading their center? You're muted, CJ. You're good.
Uh, Honestly, at this point, I think it is the best option for the Suns. Jusuf Nurkic, yeah, they did bring him in. He was in the DeAndre Ayton trade. He was kind of, the piece that the Suns got back to try and help continue to elevate the roster. But I think it was kind of obvious, he wasn't really fitting into whatever offensive system the Suns were trying to run. Jusuf Nurkic, he's a solid player. He's a good rebounder. He takes up space in the middle of the paint. But when you're Mike Budenholzer and you want to run a little bit more of a fast-paced offense, you have to think of kind of the offense that he ran in Milwaukee with a guy like Brook Lopez, who was a good, in the paint, but he also had the ability to stretch the floor. He could shoot threes, and that's not really Jusuf Nurkic's game. I really think that if they want to build a roster in the image that Mike Budenholzer wants, I think Jusuf Nurkic is a solid person to really look at to trying to move off of and see if you can get some additional assets back in return.
I agree with you, CJ, and you brought up some valuable points as well when talking about Jusuf Nurkic. He's a guy who can kind of do everything for the Phoenix Suns and help out with all the intangibles here. But realistically, with this Suns team needing rebounding, needing some help down low in the force within the paint, keeping Jusuf Nurkic might not be the best ability or the best center to do so. Not saying go out and get a star center. We already know with DeAndre Ayton that didn't work, but maybe going and getting a center that can fit our needs would work better. So CJ, we got some trades here. We got some possible names that we can talk about possibly doing some trades. We want to know your guys' thoughts down below when we break down these trades. So let us down below after every trade that we go over. But first, CJ, we're going to be talking about a guy that you really, really like and I really, really like for this Phoenix Suns squad. You might have saw him in the thumbnail, but ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be diving in and talking about Clint Capella. Now, obviously, the Atlanta Hawks got the sweepstakes. They won the NBA draft lottery, so they could be looking to trade guys like Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, Clint Capella, and I think he'd be a perfect fit on the Suns. You obviously look to move off Jusuf Nurkic, Eric Gordon, and Josh Okogie with those player options, They opt in. You then use them to trade for Clint Capella. The salary would match to do the trade, and you would obviously send some picks in return. So CJ, when you look at this trade, what do you think of this? Does this scream to you that this is an A-plus move, or do you think that this is a little bit of a lateral move?
I think this is the move that the Suns need to be really looking at if they're looking to move off of Jusuf Nurkic. Jusuf Nurkic is really the only big man that the Suns have on their roster right now. And if he doesn't fit, you really need to make sure that you're targeting a player or an asset that's going to net you something in return that's going to, at the very least, still give you some flexibility on the interior. Clint Capella would be a massive improvement to what the Suns are doing. He's a really stout defender. He blocks shots. He can run the floor. He's athletic. He hustles. He's a really, really solid big man for today's NBA standards, and he's definitely someone that could fit into what the Suns want to do. When you look at in terms of the players that in that trade that you presented, adding Eric Gordon, adding Josh Okogie, and obviously the picks would probably need to be involved with Clint Capella, who's still a relatively young player. You have to also remember that that would require Gordon and Okogie to pick up their player options. So that would have to be included and worked out. And then you have to also factor in is that are these players that the Atlanta Hawks want to pick up? They would be expiring contracts, so that would be a good thing for the Hawks. And then on top of that, the Hawks are probably going to be looking to move in a different direction anyway because they have that number one overall pick. There's players in the draft like Alex Sarr, who is a 7 foot, freakazoid athlete. And then there's a bunch of other like high quality big men center types that the Suns may or that the Atlanta Hawks may want to think about drafting with that first overall pick. So they may not even need Clint Capella moving forward. So I really think that this is a ideal trade target for the Phoenix Suns, something they should definitely look into. If it requires moving off of Jusuf Nurkic, if it requires a first round pick, I think that's where the Suns would go. I really think you should try and keep at least one of those other two picks because you may need them for another trade. But if you have to, I think Clint Capella is an ideal target for the Suns.
I think so too. And you mentioned the rebounding, the defense. I think having that lob ability as well down low, just having a fantastic paint presence on both sides of the floor. Clint Capella is known for having double doubles on consistent averages, and that's something that the Suns could desperately use down low in their front court. And I think moving off of guys like Nurkic, they have a guy, Onyeka Okongwu, who's kind of young. You mentioned Alexander Sarr, maybe possibly drafted, and they could fit him into that room or possibly move him off in a deal later down the line. And Okogie and Eric Gordon being expiring contracts. Now, I want to look at another trade. I saw this report. This trade from one of the Phoenix Suns reporters. I do not know the name off the top of my head, but they had a trade with the Grizzlies and the Phoenix Suns, where the Suns would receive Brandon Clark and John Conchar for Jusuf Nurkic. Now, obviously, the Grizzlies traded Steven Adams at the end to middle of last season, trading him to the Rockets. So they have no center unless you want to put Jaren Jackson at the center, but then you have no power forward. With their injuries, with their young depth, moving off some guys in Brandon Clark, a young piece, and John Conchar could help out as they didn't really play for the Grizzlies this year, as Conchar was at the end of the rotation and Clark was injured. Do you like this trade a little bit better, or do you think that this one is a little bit worse, CJ?
I'm not. I don't necessarily like it for the Suns' perspective. From the Grizzlies' perspective, I think that they would take it. I think they need more big bodies to kind of go along with what they're trying to do. When you're building a team, around guys like John Morant and Desmond Bane, you do need some guys, in the interior. And I think Jusuf Nurkic would actually be a pretty decent fit. He's pretty good in pick and roll situations, so I think that's something that the Grizzlies would like to have. As far as the returns there, yeah, Brandon Clark, John Conchar, I like Brandon Clark as a player. I think he's got a lot of hustle, but he's so injury prone. He's been injured for the majority of the past 2 seasons, and that is a really big risk. He's got a lot of potential, and he's really, really someone that you would want play at least 20 minutes a game coming off the bench or even in a starting position. But I don't know if you can rely that, and give up assets to, think that he's going to be able to stay on the court. And then John Cardinchar, in that trade, the Suns aren't moving off of any of their guards. They're still Nasir Little. There still would still be Eric Gordon, still Josh Okogie, and the Suns already have a pretty crowded backcourt. And with John Cardinchar, I just don't know if he really would sniff the rotation. I'd be more interested in looking into could you add like a Derrick Rose into that mix, a true point guard. I'm gonna say it until the cows come home. There's another point guard that you can finally add. Derrick Rose has the experience. I think he would fit in well, learn and pick up quickly how to play with guys like Bradley Beal and Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. He's not familiar with playing with other star players. So Derrick Rose, just so many years in the league, we know, what he was capable of before injuries hit him, former MVP. He wouldn't be cheap. You don't have to play him a lot of minutes. He could be maybe a backup point guard if you were trying to look for, other areas, but at least you'd have a true point guard. I'd much rather look at this trade if we were talking about Derrick Rose, but even still, when you're giving up Jusuf Nurkic, which is probably one of your better trade assets, and you're getting a potentially injury prone player, and then a guy who might make the rotation on the back of the bench, I don't know if that's something that the Suns want to entertain.
Yeah, I agree with you. Unfortunately for Brandon Clark, he has, like you mentioned, very high potential. Could be a nice young player, but his injuries have riddled him with the Grizzlies. And I thought he was going to get traded from the Grizzlies, honestly, this season with their whole rebuilding and stuff like that. But nope, we'll have to wait and see with him. But especially with that Suns team having battered injuries to their core three this year, I don't know if you want to implement that in. And then John Conchar, like you mentioned, we already have some great guards. We do need that point guard. We've been hammering that nail down on all you guys, as you guys know. But obviously, we'll have to wait and see. I'm a big fan of the Clint Capella trade. I can tell that you are too. But now we're going to look at three potential guys that the Suns could also get as well. These are no trades, but these are just going to be three potential guys that we're just going to dive in. So we're going to look quick, and I'm going to ask you to give me in order how you would rank them, CJ. So first, we got Zach Collins. Obviously, nice center, can help out with the rebounding. Does fit in, so they Suns could trade for him as he's under the $18.1 million. But would the Spurs realistically move off of Zach Collins? We don't really know. The next one is the Pistons. They obviously have a logjam of wings and bigs with Jalen Duran, James Wiseman, Isaiah Stewart. But Isaiah Stewart is the one that we're going to mention. 22 years old, could be a nice rebounding center, could be a young piece to bring in and help out with this old expiring core. And then lastly, we're going to talk about Mitchell Robinson, guy who we mentioned in a previous video talking about Devin Booker and Julius Randle trade when that rumor was going around the world. But Mitchell Robinson has had some injury history this last couple year, but with Isaiah Hartenstein kind of taking over in that Knicks role, he could be a guy that the Knicks look to move off of. So CJ, out of those three guys, how would you rank them in order of how you would like the Suns to get them?
So I think the first person, top of the list is easy for me, and that's Mitchell Robinson with the New York Knicks. I think he would not be the kind of player that he is someone that would fit in perfectly to what the Suns want to do. Again, he's another big guy, good rebounder, solid in pick and roll. Decent defender, probably not as good as Clint Capella, but he's got some size and bulk, and he doesn't just get pushed around on the defensive end. So I do like Mitchell Robinson. He's also a player because of the emergence of Isaiah Hartenstein that the New York Knicks might consider moving off of if they believe that they're able to pick up some trade assets so they can continue building their team. They're going to have Julius Randle come back next year. So that may be a potential target that the Suns could acquire if the Knicks are thinking about moving off of them. The other two names, they're it's kind of complicated in terms of how I want to rank them. I would probably go second. I'd go with Zach Collins. I think he is particularly just because of the fit that he would be. He would be able to stretch the floor a little bit. He's not a terrible defender. He's okay on the defensive end, but he has a really nice offensive game. Really nice game, around the rim. Really some good post moves, and he just has a kind of a nose for the basketball. Is a really smart player, and I think he would fit well. The only problem is that I just don't think that he's the kind of guy that the Spurs would want to move off of, particularly if the option is getting Nurkic in return, because the Spurs have Victor Wembanyama. They're not looking for any more starting center caliber centers to put on their team unless they're considering playing Wemby at the four, which Wemby he can play anywhere, so that might be possible. I just don't know if I see that as super likely. Then rounding that out, I'd probably say I'd rank the Isaiah Stewart potential last. I don't hate Isaiah Stewart as a player. I think he's got a high motor. He's a willing defender. He's a active player. But we've seen him, have some things on the court, some, getting into it with LeBron James, multiple instances where it looks like he's, ready to get into a fight. And I just don't know how he would fit in this kind of Suns locker room where there's a lot of veteran players, a lot of leadership. Is he going to be in a situation where he's going to be able to allow himself to be mentored and kind of calm some of these other antics down that we've seen from him? Granted, he's been in Detroit. They've been a bad team, a lot of losing. So I don't want to put too much on him for some of that stuff. And they've kind of been surrounded with just young players. Like they really haven't had a lot of veteran leadership in those locker rooms in Detroit that he's been around. However, he is a little undersized. He's about 6'8", at the power forward center position, and I just don't think that he would be the ideal fit on the basketball court to be a starter. When we're looking to trade your starting center, you're at the very least looking to get a starter back or someone that has the potential to be a starter. And I don't know if that Isaiah Stewart would be that kind of fit on this Suns roster.
No, I totally see what you're seeing, CJ. You're putting up some great points here about all three of these guys. From Mitchell Robinson talking about obviously how he's a fantastic rim protector. Obviously with the emergence of Isaiah Hartenstein, could he be on the way out? I think for sure, especially if they're gonna have to give him a bag. And with his injury, history this year hasn't been the greatest, but if he can stay healthy, fit in with the Sun squad, I really like it. Zach Collins, you mentioned, a little bit of a weird one because I don't think the Spurs give up on him, but I like the fit as well. And then yeah, obviously, Isaiah Stewart has a little bit of character issues, like you mentioned, on and off the court. Not the greatest, but I think he can have some young promise. And being 22 years old, it could be a nice fit. Let us know what you guys think down below, though. Out of all those guys, from Clint Capella to Brandon Clark to Zach Collins, who do you guys think would be the best fit for the Phoenix Suns? And if you guys have any other ideas for starting centers, drop them down below in the comments so we can debate, break it down, and have some good talks about the Suns. As you guys know, this is the daily place for Phoenix Suns content. So enjoy, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. From Bruce and CJ, we're going to be signing off on Suns Digest. We'll catch you guys in the next video, and go Phoenix Suns.